It's still preview time, you motherfuckers. Welcome. We're going to talk more March of the Machine stuff. If you're looking to pre-order single product or sealed product, use the link in the description below to coolstuffinc.com. Kenobi at checkout, 5% off your order. Let's hop to it. I spoke about the invasion of Ikoria yesterday in the video before we knew what the back end was, and now we know what the back end is. It's kind of been spoiled somewhere. It's a really fucking terrible looking image though. The front half is Finale of Devastation without the ability to get everything trample, so it's not really the game ending finisher that Finale is, but it's another copy of a Green X search spell like it and Green Sun's for 100 card singleton decks. But the back end is the interesting bit. It is Zilorthra, Apex of Ikoria, which is the name of the creature that was on the Godzilla buy box promo that never got its own card. Either way, 8/8 reaching dinosaur. For each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign combat damage as though it weren't blocked. This is a big lord-like creature that gives you the Lone Wolf ability, that's the card I remember it from anyway, to all of your creatures. The interesting thing about this is that the original invasion is 2 mana, so 2 mana for 6 health invasion, so you could go ahead and get this quite early if you could do 6 damage on the following turn. Probably unlikely, and then also don't forget you got to go to combat or use spells to kill the invasion to flip the other side and cast it, so you won't get the 8/8 on your turn 3 most likely, because you're unlikely to burn the invasion out prior to combat. Also, if you're casting the invasion for 2, you aren't getting anything fancy. You're getting a 0 drops. You're getting a Dryad Arbor, a Memnite, or an Ornithopter. The other bit that I missed is that it's all non-human. Not only does the big creature in the back buff non-humans, but the invasion of Ikoria itself only searches for non-humans. So you can't get a Tireless Tracker off this, for example, or an Azusa. There are certain key creatures in certain formats that you'd want to go grab that you cannot. I think it's a super interesting card. I know the word interesting is often used to describe things and you don't really have much else to say, but if we're honest, it's so unusual, it's really hard to evaluate. You can, of course, go turn 4 Vampire Hexmage, take the counters off this, or any battle for that matter, successfully win it and get the creature, but 4 mana, 2 cards, to go get as an 8/8, I don't know, that doesn't quite feel Dark Depths enough to me. Next card is a relatively inconsequential uncommon, but I do want to talk about it because it's fucking cool. This is Referee Squad, a 3 mana blue Homunculus with Convoke, so you can tap creatures to pay mana for its cost, including blue creatures for the blue pip. It has Vigilance, it's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls and stick a stun counter on it. Now, stun counters happened in Dominaria United, and I completely missed them being on like 4 uncommons because I didn't draft the set, and I was feeling quite burnt out at the time and hardly paid attention to the set. The set like passed me by. The story implications of a journey being completed were interesting, and obviously like Shield is a big thing and all that, but I completely missed stun counters. I love this mechanic. I'm really sad that I missed it. I'm glad that it's evergreen and we're going to see it more often, that you can tap something down and you remove a counter from it instead of untapping it. Multiple stun counters representing anything being stunned. It's so grokkable, it so makes sense. I think stun counters is a great mechanic. But more so than that, this is a 3 mana creature with a good ETB that has a great art. I'm gonna flicker the shit out of this bad boy. The art itself is 3 Homunculus, all like doing some sort of like anime poses as they flash up triangular magic. These appear to be from, well, my first guess was gonna be Strixhaven. They're the referees for the weird like Quidditch light game they have. But Homunculus apparently don't exist on there, so these appear to be the Battle Bond Homunculi, the ones like Zundersplit. And I love it. I absolutely love the idea of a climactic interplanar battle happens, and the thing that comes from Battle Bond is like 3 referees from their local sport, the local deathmatch sport, should I add, and they're like throwing triangles at people. This card is fucking cool. Realmbreaker the Invasion Tree is a 3 mana legendary artifact, not a land, which surprises me. 2 mana and tap, target opponent mills 3 cards, put a land card from their graveyard into the battlefield tapped under your control. It gains if this land would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And 10 mana tap, sacrifice Realmbreaker the Invasion Tree, search for any number of Praetor cards, and put them onto battlefield, then shuffle. It's a 3 mana artifact that slowly mills your opponent out like a really shit grindstone that will eventually, or millstone should I say, that will eventually on occasion hit a land and then eventually allow you to go search up your Praetors. If you're playing like Praetor Tribal, or you're playing like Vorinclex and something else as a combo in Commander, sure, I guess. It's another one of those cards that once you play a Conspiracy, you activate it and put your entire deck into play in terms of creatures. So that's neat, I guess, but on the whole, I don't think this is that impressive. Yeah, I just want to point out that Boonbringer Valkyrie, the backup 1 flying first striking lifelinking 4/4, it backups, right? So it gives a thing flying first striking lifelink and puts a counter on it, which is pretty good. I wanted to compare this to Baneslayer, something I hadn't thought of yesterday, because when it ETBs on its own, you just put a counter on itself and it's just a 5/5, it's just Baneslayer. But if you put it on something else, it's like It's like 80% of a Baneslayer plus turning something else into a mini Baneslayer, and I just think this card's actually even better than I first thought. I talked about it yesterday about it being just a fun mechanical thing I want to flicker sometimes, but it actually seems like a pretty decent card, and it makes me laugh how far Baneslayer has fallen from being actually a format staple, because this shit's all over Baneslayer Angel. Speaking of power creep, Sword of Once and Future, a 3-mana sword, the blue-black one, the cycle is complete, but the power creep is kind of the other way, so I think this card is really quite good by old Magic standards. If we actually think about where it would fit into formats now, I don't think this is playable. It gives the equipped creature +2/+2, protection from blue and protection from black, and equips for 2 like all the other swords in X and Y. And whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to Surveil 2, and then you may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana 2 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So essentially, look at the top 2 cards of your library, and you may put any number of them into the graveyard, and then after resolving that part of the ability, you do the next bit, so you can kind of self-set up by putting an instant sorcery from your library into your graveyard and casting it, or you can just cast something else you've played this turn. Like, the blue and black protections are definitely up there. Red is probably the best protection colour you can get, but in Modern and Legacy, you want to dodge Fatal Pushes, you want to get through Murktides, you don't want to get bounced by Brazen Borrowers. There's a lot of effects in the blue and black part of the game that you want to dodge, but beyond that, being able to recast Swords to Plowshares, your own Fatal Pushes, when Legacy hint Turoks or Thoughtseizers or any of this sort of stuff is very good, but ultimately it doesn't do anything on its own, similar to them a lot, but unlike a lot of the other ones. Like, Fire and Ice just puts a card into your hand and pings something, being maybe the best sword by a long shot, with War and Peace probably be my second favourite of the 10. I like this card a lot. I'm definitely going to try and play with it somewhere. I really love the swords. They're some of my favourite cards of all time. Fire and Ice is one of, if not, the most exciting card to hit someone with. I love drawing a card and pinging something. I just think it's funny that this card's probably too slow for most formats now. And on top of that, Caldra Complete kind of makes all of this stuff just look like shit anyway. Like, you always want to play Caldra Complete in your deck, and then other equipments come in later. And then once you've picked Batterskull and maybe a Jit, you're kind of shit out of luck. Maybe one sword makes the cut, but it's unlikely. Zirgo is riding Uchitai from Khans of Tarkir with a 5-mana American colours, Jeskai colours, a 4/4 with flying and haste, and it has a hexproof the turn it enters the battlefield. And whenever one or more dragons, so it triggers on other dragons as well, when they hit your opponent and deal combat damage, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. You may return one of those dragons to your owner's hand. I actually didn't read that last line the first time I read this. You can also return a dragon to your hand. So essentially what this is doing, like all of the combos, it's combining 2 cards. This is original Dragon Lord Ujitai, who was hexproof when untapped, I believe. Oh god, I should look this up before I started talking. And then when it hit people with this anticipate thing where you look at 3 cards and put one into your hand. And then Zirgo itself, Bell Smasher, was a 2/2 hasty creature that could also go back to hand thanks to dash. I really like these combinations, and I think this card is really quite good. A 5-mana hasting flyer that replaces itself by drawing a card if it makes contact, and can't be killed outside of edicts and actually blocking it on a turn it comes in. Can't be exiled, can't be tapped, can't be sealed away, can't be any of those sort of tricks. Seems really good. The fact that it also allows other dragons to trigger on that, and allows you to put one of the dragons back in your hand, even itself, to protect itself from sorcery speed removal, to always have hexproof if you're recasting it and such. I think this card's really, really strong. I like it a lot. Whether or not it'll be a staple anywhere, who the fuck knows at this point. But I think this card, as far as 5-mana hasting flyers go, it's probably one of the better ones of recent time. Is it better than Goldspan Dragon? Well, probably not. Goldspan Dragon it creates so much value when targeted and when attacking as well, making those treasures and ramping you. Well, this is sort of card draw on an evasive and a hard to kill body. I think it's close, you know. It also just plays very well alongside Goldspan Dragon, although having multiple 5-drops in your deck if you're not playing Commander is not great. Quintorius Lawmaster. I thought he was a Planeswalker. Instead, we have a 3/5 Elephant Boy Cleric, and he's a legendary creature with a Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, exile target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard and create a 3/2 White Spirit creature token, harkening back to the weird 3/2 Spirit token theme of Strixhaven. He basically turns the spells into living lore. Then for 3 mana, you can tap him, you can crack one of the spirits open, and choose target card exile with Quintorius. You may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into the graveyard, put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead, so you can't, like, get... That's to stop you abusing this. A really cool and thematic and flavorful card. I can't see myself getting too excited about playing it, but it's a cool commander. I like the idea that it's animating the spell scrolls of Strixhaven to fight the war, and occasionally cracks one open to cast the demonic tutor within. The back half of Evasion of New Phyrexia, the X battle that makes 2/2 vigilant white-blue knight tokens, well, it's Teferi. I said instant sorcery in my video yesterday, and I should have guessed Planeswalker as well. Teferi, a co-sort of Zalfir, says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. So that's his +1, going up to 5 loyalty from 4. -2 is you get an emblem with knights you control, get +1/+0 and have ward 1. So he's a knight tribal Planeswalker, which is weird. We know that tribal Planeswalkers in the past haven't been very good, so it's interesting to see them do that to Teferi, especially the Mythic Teferi. That is the forefront of the set. And then -3, which you can do upon coming in, so another Planeswalker without an actual traditional ultimate, but instead having 3 abilities available immediately, is tap X creatures you control. When you do, shuffle target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value X or less into its owner's library. So it plays very well off the front half, and I guess the difference between this and, say, the traditional like elf-based Nissa of original Zendikar is that this creates a load of the knights ahead of time, so that the emblem that you get off the -2 ends up being good for those knights. Also, Zalfnir, the whole like archetype within the set seems to be knights that buff knights. It's an army and a cam that your opponent then has to stop you hitting, otherwise you get a Planeswalker that draws you 2 and discards a card every turn. Yeah, it seems reasonable. This is probably way better than I think it is, but it doesn't really excite me that much. Halo Forager has got some people hot under the collar, a 3 mana fairy rogue with flying. It's a 3/1, and when Halo Forager enters the battlefield, you may pay X. When you do, you may cast a target instant or sorcery spell with mana value X from a graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. Now, people are talking about how this can target any graveyard, and it can cast 0-cost spells. So we're talking the Rhino spell in Modern, we're talking Ancestral Visions to draw 3 cards, but ultimately I don't see why this is getting people hot under the collar when we had a 2/1 that did this in Brothers War as well, Arcane Proxy, which could do the same thing. It could cast 0-cost cards immediately when it came in. I guess this has flying, so it has evasion, has 1 more point of power. It's also a rogue, which is a relevant creature type, I guess, and more importantly, it can cast the opponent's stuff. And you can cast bigger things than its own power if you pay the mana into it. Ultimately, I think maybe this could be a sideboard card against those decks. Imagine against them you get to play their rhinos. Or I guess you could play it alongside it as well. And I don't know. Seems now you've got a critical mass of Halo Forger and Arcane Proxy. How many of them can you play alongside your own Shardless Agents, for example, for that deck? I don't know. But playing it in your opposing deck to play your opponent's stuff. Hell, Mill getting to play your opponent's stuff if this was a creature that you played in the blue-black Mill deck in Historical. Probably not Modern, it's too slow. But yeah, I think it's an interesting design. I really like the card. I just don't know if it's going to make the waves that people think it's going to. Borborygmos on Fibblethip is a 5 mana 6/5 rug Cyclops Homunculus. Whenever Borborygmos on Fibblethip enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card, and they may discard any number of land cards. When you discard 1 or more cards this way, Borborygmos on Fibblethip deal twice that much damage to target creature. So draw a card when you enter the battlefield or attack, and discard lands to shoot stuff. Very Fibblethip, very Borborygmos. And 2 mana, you may put it on top of its owner's library to give it some form of evasion from removal. It's great. The art is awesome, with little Fibblethip riding on the head of Borborygmos, the raging Cyclops. Is it any good? I think it's okay. Drawing cards is nice and stuff, and you may discard any number of land cards. You don't have to discard cards if you don't want to. So draw a card, attack, draw a card. But other than that, it feels a bit vanilla. Itali on the front half is a 7 mana trampling Elder Dinosaur, and whenever it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from top of their library until they exile a non-land card. So you can't whiff on lands with this one. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land exiled cards this way without paying their mana cost. So Itali lives up to their name as being quite a strong effect upon ETB. And then 10 mana, which is green Phyrexian plus 9 of any other, to activate as a sorcery to transform Itali into her Phyrexian. Well, I think the story of hers, it was a him actually. To transform them into their Phyrexianized version. Itali Primal Sickness, which is an 11/11 with Trample, indestructible. Whenever a Tali Primal Sickness deals combat damage to a player, that player gets that many poison counters. Yes, we have our own new Blightsteel Colossus. I guess it comes strapped to a 7 mana, cast your opponent's shit, and then flip it over into this thing. This seems like an absurd commander in terms of the fact that like the ETB value of the 7-drop is very, very strong, like old school Atali was. And then you've also got this like Infect Wingcon that has Trample, by the way. Also, it's better than normal Infect. It doesn't replace the damage. So if it ends up rolling over and doing 9 damage to a player, they take 9 damage, and then they take 9 poison counters as well, which you can then proliferate. Well, that's just teaching you to suck eggs. But either way, I think this card is fucking sick. It's really expensive. 7 mana to cast, 10 to flip. If someone kills this once or twice in Commander, you're going to struggle to ever play it again. So I don't think it's broken, but I think it's a fun, powerful effect that's going to piss people off. Infect and Poison just pisses people off in general. Mirrodin Avenge is a 1 mana instant, draw a card, cantripping, destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. I think it's interesting to see a 1 mana instant destroy a creature, draw a card, like a cantripping removal spell. But I'll be honest, it's not going to see any play anywhere, because it's just the caveat of having to damage a creature first is just too much. That said, it is a story spotlight of Khan lifting Elesh Norn's severed fucking head into the sky, so I could not mention it. Very cool piece of art. I do want to say at this point, and I'll probably do a further video on this, I think Elesh Norn, Sheoldred, Jin-Gitaxias, Vorinclex, and I think actually Urabraska survived from the flavor text of the card where he's getting his limbs pulled off, but the other 4 getting unceremonious, well, okay, Elesh Norn was ceremoniously destroyed, but the other 3 getting lopped off in 1 paragraph of the story at the end of this block is ridiculous. All 4 Praetors getting murdered, I think is mad, and I don't think that in a good way. I think it's very sudden, it's very... I don't know, the build-up and the foreshadowing and the setup for all of this I thought was great. I was really invested. I was even willing to suspend my disbelief about Phyrexian Oil just tickling your bumhole and transforming you immediately, which is not what it used to do. But now that they've all been killed and the storyline's been finished, wham bam, thank you ma'am, and we're going to have a little bit of aftermath as a treat, I don't know. It all feels a little bit cheap. Invasion of Fiora that I talked about yesterday, the 6 mana Wrath for Legends or non-Legends, if you're playing a legendary deck like Kethis, you can blow up everything and swing into this on the turn you cast it. The back end is another Marquesa, the Resolute Monarch, a human noble 3/6 with Menace and Death Touch, and whenever it attacks, with all counters from up to 1 target permanent. So it attacks, trigger, it says, kill target planeswalker or win target battle, which is kind of mad. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you haven't been dealt combat damage since your last turn, you may draw a card and lose 1 life. So it checks all the previous player's turns before your upkeep, and if you haven't lost life from combat damage, you get to Phyrexian Arena on a creature. This seems pretty decent. I really do. I don't think it's game breaking or anything, but I think it's a really reasonable 6 mana Wrath that gives you a very good body on the back end, that draws you cards, removes stuff, and has evasion, and has absolutely 7 out of 10 would play in Commander. Transcendent Message is the story moment where the fucking Dryad, Ren and 8, attached to the Realmbreaker, gets in touch with Teferi through the intergalactic telephone. Their fingers touch across the eternity barrier between planes. Convoke, draw X cards. Blue, 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 X. Okay, I don't think we've had a Convoke draw spell before. I guess it's a thing. It's rather unexciting, but I don't hate it. I don't think it's a bad design. It just doesn't really tickle my stink. Then we have a copy of Negate as a story spotlight. Counter target non-creature spell, showing a Johnny getting the Phresis wiped off of him, which I think is fucking ridiculous. Negate can counter most of the spells that cause Phresis, things like Corrupted Conscience and stuff, but it doesn't remove it once it's on. If an enchantment turns you into a Phyrexian with Infect, Negate's not going to do shit. The idea of a completely solid counterspell that sees plenty of play across multiple formats because it's so efficient and so clean in what it does, but that being the story moment where Ajani, our famed original mono-white planeswalker who's been corrupted by the forces of Phyrexia, gets wiped clean of the infection by the sacrifice, I believe, of Malira. This just seems like a really fucking weird story moment to have on Negate, if I'm honest. Goes to show that you can do a lot with a Salt Bath and the healing power of crystals. Elesh Norn, Mummy, is back. This time she's just Elesh Norn. I assume there's going to be a comma and the word Mummy there, but they just didn't commit. 4 mana legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, Vigilance. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or opponent you control, that source controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1. A interesting tax effect that pings you if you haven't got mana spare when you attack in or kill creatures. 3 mana, sacrifice 3 other creatures and exile Elishnorn and return to the battlefield transformed into her alternative form, which is the Argent Etchings. Incubate 5 times. So you get 5 incubate tokens with 2 counters on them, and then transform all incubate tokens you control, so they can immediately become creatures. So flipping her makes you 10 power. That's pretty decent. Second Pip as a Saga gives creatures you control +1/+1 and double strike until end of turn, which is a wild attack with the 10 power you've just been given. And number 3 is probably her best bit. Oof. Destroy all the permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians. Then exile the Argent Etchings and return to the battlefield front face up. This card is fucking awesome. A 3/5 vigilant creature with a Staxy effect on the front end, and then for 3 mana and the low cost of stacking 3 tokens, you get more tokens, double strike, and then this like weird one-sided wrath. This card is fucking great. I might even build this as a commander. I generally might. I don't know if I really want to build a mono-white commander right now, but this gets me considering it as some sort of stacks effect. Monastery Mentor gets a reprint. That's right. A 3 mana mythic that whenever you cast a spell, make a 1/1 white monk with prowess, and it has prowess itself. This card was a finisher for Control decks and Legacy for the longest time, until Sensitive Violence Hop was banned from the format and Modern Horizons 2 absolutely fucked everything. Card was okay in Standard, has never really seen a home in Modern, but saw plenty of play in Legacy, which is a testament to how it's very good if there's enough cheap spells to support it. The fact that Convoke as a mechanic is in the set suggests to me that there might be somewhere, maybe even in Standard, a Convoke deck where Monastery Mentor will make a token when you convoke stuff, and the tokens themselves will help to convoke this spell. And that's my picks from things I want to talk about today. There'll probably be another video tomorrow as I unpack more of the previews as we go on. Perpetual hype and all that. If you've enjoyed the video, do consider subscribing for more Magic news, gameplay, and commentary. And on occasion, I'll talk about armpits and arseholes too. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.